Hey there everybody, hope you're having a great week. Alright, yeah, just a fun one to throw in during the week this week because number one, I wanted to have a break from Excel. Number two, I've been playing around with just upskilling some stuff for future for video things. And number three, we got just the right grade of Whackadoodle comment on one of the videos from last week that gives us a bit of fun to both go through the comment and have some learning along the way. So just using this one as a bit of practice for fun because sometimes comments really are the gift that keeps on giving. And I think there's going to be, just in general, learnings on many fronts, including how not to be that person on the internet. So on the video post Sunday's very muddy CX National Round 1, I was showing just how wonderful life is when you're on immersive waxing to reset your chain and drivetrain. We got a most magnificent comment from Ron DeVivre, which we'll go through in a sec. Having a quick look at Ron's profile. Not sure which one Ron is. Pronouns we, us, perhaps. All of them are Ron. The little profile saying there translates into I didn't need that hypothesis. It's an interesting profile statement. Just a potential initial insight into the mind of Ron and his comment. All right, let's have a look. All right, rather than me read out Ron's comment and then correct, because that's what I normally do, but that's a bit boring. I've been playing around with some other things over time, trying to upskill on the video front for potential future fun things. So let's try that. I have imagined what Ron may sound like, and we'll have my imagined Ron reading out his comment, and then I'll provide input along the way, and we should have some fun learning as we go.
524. Through at 5. 55. Looks like your wax serves as a chain stiffener, a chain drag conditioner. Put a scale on that waxed mess. Measure the force required to flex as one. Well waxed. Link. Then scale a well-oiled link. A well-oiled chain will fold under its own weight. No so for waxed chains. I'm certain you have no such capable scale powder scale, else you'd have already demoed and published verifiable, repeatable results. Repeat at 5. 24 through at 5. 55 with a well-oiled chain.
All right, thank you, Ron, for raising that point there. So yes, as we can see, here is my just freshly waxed chain post resetting with the boiling water flush rinses and into the wax pot. So a freshly waxed chain for those of you that have any knowledge at all of immersive waxing and chains, you will know that once they are cooled after being re-waxed, the chain is very stiff. Typically, you will want to break the wax bond on the links to reinstall the chain on your drivetrain. There goes my magnificent kitty in the background. Typically the chain will be quite draggy. It's quite noticeable that there's a lot of drag when you're riding along for the first, potentially up to around sort of 5 minutes, depending on what wax you're using and the temperature. Normally by around 10 minutes, you don't notice it anymore. And again, most times, depending on wax and temperature, by around about 30 minutes, the chain is in its optimal place, or the wax treatment, is broken into its optimal place, ready to race. At which time, the top immersive wax chains are tested by those that have been doing outright efficiency testing for a long time, as generally the fastest chain lubricants options that you can go with. So what I find, I guess, quite spectacular about this cracking start of Ron is that he obviously has absolutely no knowledge of immersive waxing and bicycle chains. And yet, instead of to me, a normal person would have raised that as a question. If you'd raised it as a question like, hey, that's a bit odd, wouldn't that be really draggy? Wouldn't an oil chain be better because it's not going to have all that obvious drag that I'm seeing there in your video? Then that would say, okay, here's somebody who really isn't familiar with immersive wax chains, and let me explain the break-in period for him. Just coming in hot like that, wondering where my repeatable test results are, when he has absolutely zero knowledge of the topic he is coming in, schooling us all on, it's a special kind of person to me.
As a chain moves through a drivetrain, it flexes only when disengaging with gear pulley teeth. That flexes under load only across the top. 2 points only as the chain leaves the round comfort of a cog flexing to a straight line to the chain ring where it once again flexes to round. YALL sure are throwing lots of snake oil at a problem you've created in your own mind. Chains on bicycles are consumables. The fastest way to ruin a chain is to use it on a bicycle.
All right, so Ron thinks there's not much in it with his enormous wisdom of bicycle chain lubrication, between, I gather, sort of one lube to another. So what's all the hoo-ha about with wax? This is some, sort of open test data from a little bit ago, so back in the Friction Facts days. So even then, we've got the fastest drip lubricant tested at the time, a wax drip with UFO at under 4 watts loss at 250 watt load, and the worst lubricant test at the time, White Lightning Epic Ride, at 9 watts loss. So we have over a 5 watt efficiency loss difference at 250 watt load between the best and the worst. And that is in perfect clean lab conditions, a top lubricant that resists becoming contaminated and increasing in losses better than other lubricants, which typically the ones at the fast end here will be doing versus some of these pretty poor wet lubricants at the end. That gap is only going to get much, much bigger. There is actually quite a lot of action happening on a bicycle chain, and the challenge for the chain lubricant is actually extremely high. So we do have where, obviously all your pedaling load, so as the link wants to articulate around the cogs and also around the top span of the chainring, the pressure loads especially on the pin and the inner link plate that's articulating around the pin, as well as the roller that sits on the inner link plate shoulders, that can literally be in the tens of thousands of PSI pressure load for that to be happening. And there'll be some obviously much lighter load on the side of the roller to the side of the inner link plate and the side of the inner link plate to outer link plate. More load will be introduced onto those surfaces, the greater the chainline angle. And through the bottom span as it reticulates back, that is going to be under low load. But then that's happening quite a lot as we reticulate around the bottom pulley, articulate around and then reticulate back on top, and then it's going to repeat that again and then back again as it then is going to articulate around the cog. And we have, in total, 8 separate sliding surfaces, every link, articulation and reticulation inside each chain link. So if you're pedaling at sort of 90-95 cadence in most large chain rings, it's typically around 40,000 articulations and reticulations a minute, with those 8 separate parts that are moving from static to X amount of movement, holding static again, then reticulating back. We have 40,000 of those with 8 surfaces doing that. We have over 300,000 individual pieces of friction movement per minute as you're pedaling along in the large chain ring at that sort of 90-95 cadence, some of which under extremely high pressure load, and some of which we want the lowest stiction and the least amount of viscous friction possible for all that action to be happening, because as cyclists we only have a very finite power. We don't want to be throwing away another 1, 2, 3 or 5 watts in efficiency loss in a chain when there are options that do not do that. And so of course, adding to the quite unique and extreme lubrication for your bicycle chain is the fact that it is exposed to all of the environment that you are riding in. It is just there's not many machine parts that are actually just completely open and exposed like that have such hard work to do. So obviously your engine is sealed, has an air filter, has an oil filter, bearings are typically sealed. Your chain is working like a bat out of hell, needing both extreme high pressure lubrication as well as the lowest viscous friction and stiction for all the huge amount of workload going on in the low pressure areas. And all of that's happening out in whatever you are throwing at the chain. And so again, not just by me, but many others as well, The top waxes and wax strips have proven that they resist becoming contaminated, more abrasive, higher friction, higher wear, much better than oils and wet lubricants. And that is just, again, basic physics. Much less sticks versus wet or oil, and also a wax or good wax strip doesn't provide much of a pathway for the dust or crap that's on the outside of the chain to be transported inside the chain, whereas wet lubricants and oils are basically pumped around through the chain's movement, and whatever is on the outside very quickly becomes what's running in your lubricant on the inside.
Chains on bicycles are the absolute wrong tool for the application. Chains, like most metal-to-metal mechanisms, are meant to be operated with continuous lubrication. Witness internal combustion engine timing chains, industrial drip oil systems. But cyclists? Cycling? We don't care. Chains transmit our pedal power into forward motion better than anything else yet. We must accept chains as consumable. So, chains on bicycles are the wrong tool for the application, while simultaneously being the best possible tool for the application.
Right, that is, in my opinion, some grade A pontification, and again misses the huge, big, obvious point. The reason why there has been such enormous focus in this area by so many manufacturers over the last decade is because there's such a great difference to be had. So, for sure, the bicycle chain being completely exposed, so it's, the challenge with its lubrication, that's a real thing. But that's why there's been that focus and so much progress. I mean, just look where we are now with how much, say, immersive waxing has taken off and really become so mainstream, even at a world tour level now, versus where it was a decade ago, where it was extremely niche. And how many wax strip products do we have to either be standalone, still a great option versus running an oil or wet lube, or to use to complement your immersive waxing so that it takes the pressure off needing to do an immersive wax every re-lubrication. Things have just come so far, and the learnings from both, manufacturers, cyclists, and cycling media covering bicycle chain lubrication has also come a very long way, which is a great thing. Aside from just the excellent efficiency differences of getting a great lubricant running on your chain as opposed to a really not great lubricant, really it's the consumable aspect or the wear life aspect. The differences are absolutely massive. So, and this is more so the tougher conditions you tend to ride in. So the difference between, say, a top wax or wax strip versus a not so great oil or wet lubricant in terms of your chain wear life and your drivetrain component wear life, it can literally be 5 times to 10 times in favor of the top wax or wax strip versus the not so great oil or wet lubricant. And depending on the cost of your components, that can mean quite a lot of savings, as well as saving a lot of resources and environmental crap with, at the end of the day, the more components you have to replace, that's more components that need to be manufactured, packaged, shipped all around the world, all of that stuff. Wouldn't it be great with just a little bit of knowledge and an excellent lubricant choice to cut the number of chains, cassettes, and chain rings you need to replace down by half, third, a fifth, or even a tenth? Because that is literally the tested difference between some of the top products versus some of the worst products.
Haitian 651. If you're using a master link on a derailleur chain, you'll be going for a very short ride, unless you don't shift gears. It's rather disingenuous to present as a bicycle master when you're ignorant of the terminology. May I expect you'll reply, Master Link or Quick Link? Who cares what they're called? Well, a link buyer sure needs the proper name.
That's quite magnificent there by Ron. Thank you. So whether you decide to call the link that connects your chain together a master link, a connect link, or a quick link, which are the 3 most common names that are used, and different brands can tend to call them a different thing, it's not really going to care. So the length of your ride is not going to alter based on if you called the correct link you used to connect your chain together a master link, a connector link, or a quick link. It's going to be the same link. It's just bizarre. So I've also, just for the record, I do not believe that I have ever referred to myself as a bicycle master, because that would frankly be weird and embarrassing, because I am most certainly not, nor am I aware that anybody else has referred to me as a bicycle master, which is a strange title. I don't think that qualification really exists in any country. I am somebody who focuses on bicycle chain lubrications and drivetrain. So that's my quite narrow field of focus. I have, comparative to a huge number of people, very limited and poor knowledge on many other aspects of a bicycle. Suspension, linkages, a whole bunch of stuff around brakes, frame design, many things. I have my field of focus, and I have built up some knowledge in that field. A bicycle master, I most definitely am not, and I have no idea what Ron is pulling out of his butt.
On Campagnolo's Ekar page it states, extensive comparative tests have demonstrated that the 9-tooth is as efficient as any 10 or 11-tooth sprocket on any system, with no additional friction across its narrow, wide teeth, so you don't lose any of the wattage you produce. Zero Friction has no such confidence. From an earlier Zero Friction YT video, where you said, but trying to get that outright efficiency number, it's extremely difficult to make sure that's accurate. So there's so many factors that can. I guess have that number come out a bit wobbly, or simply just not align with another test lab. You've admitted several things here. 1. You're unaware of or incapable of conducting a controlled experiment with a single variable. 2. You're unaware of or incapable of peer review. If your numbers aren't reproducible by others, maybe it's your numbers, your procedures. I've searched your website looking for a description of your test methods. Your dynamometer.
So much fun with all of this one. All right, sorry, a little bit here. Okay, for a start, outright efficiency testing for bicycle chain lubrication losses or outright efficiency losses, that is extremely difficult. And that is why it's not just out there being done by every manufacturer or independent test lab providing this information for us. Again, he just demonstrates absolutely zero knowledge of what he's commenting on here. So to get an outright efficiency loss, it is not a single variable. What test load, what chainring size, what cog size, what cadence, temperature, humidity, the chain, how are you cleaning it? What do you is there any break-in process for the chain to try to mitigate variance between chains? Do you have a dedicated test chain? Many things. So this is where what we have seen is that from one test facility versus another test facility that are doing outright efficiency testing, they are producing very different efficiency loss numbers for the same lubricant. And that is one of the big reasons why I don't go down the outright efficiency path and instead use a wear rate correlation to test how the lubricant is performing over thousands of kilometers and with contamination. With efficiency testing, obviously then, aside from getting just a clean lab review or clean lab result of a chain's outright efficiency, which in many cases is not that helpful if you're going to head out onto the trails or gravel or even wet road conditions. What protocols is one facility going to be doing versus another to see how a lubricant performs with its efficiency losses in those conditions? and what variables are going to be difference in the contamination they're using, when, how they're applying it, how often, how much, and so on and so on. In short, testing for outright efficiency losses for a lubricant on a bicycle chain, on a bicycle drivetrain, is actually very complicated. There are lots of variables that need to be controlled, and at the moment we do not have any two facilities in the world that have the same controls and produce the same results for the same lubricant. So, as a wrap on that first point, you can take your I can't control for a single variable and shove that up your you-know-what. Next, let's have a look at Ekar. So this is off the Campagnolo website. So characteristics, 13-speed, full range to match or exceed any 2x systems, no wastage, 9-tooth sprocket. Allows full range with zero drop in efficiency, compact, narrow design, So he's taken Campagnolo's marketing and just run with that as gospel truth, with potentially some misunderstanding as well. I mean, who really knows what Campagnolo means with no wastage, 9-tooth sprocket? But let's have a look at some basics. This is a little bit of, fun learning here. Right, some fun learning time here. If Campy was indeed claiming that their 9-tooth is as efficient as, say, larger cogs for the same gear inches, will prove to you why they are full of crap, and that Ron is quite silly for falling for that, because it is, at the end of the day, quite basic physics and math as to why larger is more efficient versus smaller for the same gear inches. All right, let's see how fast I can run through a demo and see if I can make it make sense. Let's talk about it, say, as an example, gear inches of 50. That basically means I would travel 50 inches for one revolution of my crank. So if the gear that I want is a 50 gear inches gear for me to be pedaling along nicely, I could achieve that with using, say, a 52-tooth chainring to a 28-tooth cog, or a 39-tooth chainring to a 21-tooth cog, or a 28-tooth chainring to a 15-tooth cog. All of those give me the same gear. But if I'm doing, say, 250 watts of load at 90 cadence or 90 RPM, the actual tension load in my chain in the larger chainring is going to be much less than in the smaller chainring. So don't worry too much about leverage and power, because power from your crank length is quite a complex thing involving your biomechanics and neuromuscular timing and how well you make circles and all that sort of stuff. But from a mechanical perspective, what is, when I go to try to pedal my crank around, what is stopping the crank from turning is obviously the chain connected to the chainring, connected to the cog and the back wheel. The amount of leverage I have over trying to get that to turn is from where the pedal is on the crank to the chainring stopping me from turning it. The amount of leverage I have over the big chainring is a lot less than the amount of leverage I have over the small chainring. So for the same amount of force that I'm putting into the pedal, I'm exerting much greater tension or force load into the chain when I'm doing that in a small chainring versus if I'm doing it in a large chainring. And you can imagine if my chainring was big enough that it came all the way up to the pedal spindle, I've got much less leverage and force going through the top span of the chain yet again. Does that mean it's harder to turn? No, because for the same gear inches, the amount of leverage that my cog has over turning the back wheel is commensurate with that. So this cog has a lot more leverage over turning the back wheel forwards than what this cog does. So what you lose in leverage over your chainring at this end, you gain back at the cog and the back wheel at that end. But it does mean you are levering more force or tension load into the chain in that smaller chainring versus the larger. So we have three factors that make larger more efficient versus smaller. The big one is that lower amount of tension load going into the top span of the chain. And then as a bonus, the chain needs to articulate less to go around a big chainring and a big cog than it does to go around small. So we have less tension load and less articulation at both the chainring end and the cog end. Those three factors mean that for the same gear inches, bigger to bigger is less loss, more efficient then smaller to smaller. And again, that math and physics is simply irrefutable. And it has been proven. And it is why in the World Tour, especially in time trials, you see them running the biggest chain rings and wide range cassettes to get the biggest cogs they can, that they can physically pretty much get away with on their bike. It's just simply more efficient. So if you are happy with a particular gear inches in a 9-tooth cog and whatever chain ring you are running on the crank, for that same happy gear inches that you might like for that top gear, that will be more efficient if you're achieving that with an 11-tooth cog and a larger chainring. So Campy is full of crap, and Ron is very silly to fall for it carte blanche like that. Another quick way to think about why there's lower tension in your chain for the same power, same cadence in a larger chainring is chain speed. So as we know, like the simplistic version, turning force or torque times by your RPM is your power. Hambini trigger people don't get too tizzy in a knots about radians per second. That's just the layman's simplistic version. So you could achieve 250 watts power by pedaling at, say, 90 cadence with X amount of force into the crank, or you could achieve 250 watts at 50 cadence by putting more force into the pedals. You could achieve it doing 150 cadence with less force through the pedals, all giving you 250 watts. In a large chainring at 250 watts, 90 cadence, in say 1 minute, I'm going to pull through, basically 60 times 90 RPM of my 52-tooth chainring. So I've got 52 times by 90 times by 60. That's how many links of chain I will pull through in that time, versus 90 times by 28 times by 60. So in the larger ring, my chain speed is higher for the same power, therefore it is lower tension or lower force versus the lesser amount of chain speed in the smaller chain ring. Luckily, Jason Smith of Friction Facts did do some testing back in the day. Really just not super pleased when SRAM came out with 4832s for their new SRAM road group set. So he did a test, and we can see here that for the same gear inches, 5311 versus a 4810, that we have pretty much a 6 watt efficiency loss difference between those two for what was almost the same gear inches. So even just that change going to a 10 tooth from an 11, it's actually percentage wise quite a big change in terms of articulation, as well as with the greater tension with the 48 tooth cog versus a 53. There we have it. So across most of the ranges, the differences are not too bad. So there's sort of 1, 2, 3 watts difference. But as we get smaller and smaller, those differences become more pronounced. You may have heard, for those of you that follow Marginal Gains and Josh Portner of Silka, you will know that he thinks things like a 9-tooth cog is absolute madness from an efficiency perspective. Even a 10-tooth, we kind of want to have that as the limit for really off-road world. I agree that it's never been my favorite in the road world. The first thing that apparently the SRAM World Tour teams did when they got their new group sets back then was to block out the 10-tooth and go to larger chain rings, so they were basically back exactly where they were in their 11-speed group sets, running to a 5411. So just stay out of the 10 if you don't need it, because your chainring size is large enough with an 11-tooth cog. All right, that'll do for is there any loss with a 9-tooth, and who's full of shit, me or Campy? Let's say at this stage that it's Campy, and by extension, Ron. All right, last little bit, we'll see if we can help Ron with.
I failed to find perhaps a link, or you're all about correlation, while it's well known that correlation does not necessarily indicate causation. Where's your actual test results?
That is an outstanding question, Ron. Where indeed? Because the whole reason I've put all these years of time and effort into the lubricant testing and other testing is to, of course, keep it secret. I wouldn't want anyone to easily find it, such as going to my actual website and clicking on, say, I don't know, lubricant testing. Let's see what comes up there. Heavens to Betsy. whole bunch of information about our lubricant testing, including a link right front and center to get the full test brief if you want to know every single thing about the main test protocol. You can also then just scroll down and see a whole bunch of the just initial information you would want to know. I can zoom that up a little bit more about. This is the nuts and bolts of understanding the ZFC test and the data that you're about to read. As well as we can just go and start having a look at the actual data from the testing. Amazing. It's all kind of just there. We also have some pretty graphs which we'll be expanding on. We have a huge amount of detail reviews that we've covered for the lubricants that we've tested. You can click on all the links to go to a detail review for a lubricant on the data table. I have other videos showing, demonstrating the test and how we add contamination and basically everything you would like. The full test brief is also found in the instructions tab. We also have chain efficiency testing where we've used my wear testing for chain models in conjunction with Ceramic Speed's outright efficiency test data. And we'll be doing a little bit more with chain tensile strength testing hopefully soon now that I have fixed the machine. And just in general, huge amounts of information resources that you can find on the website. Where indeed is my testing? Perhaps a link. I can try to remember to put a link in the video, but it's zerofrictioncycling.com.au. Not exactly hidden. Right, that's that. That's the the fullness of Ron's awesome input. So yeah, I mean, I can only say as a summary, as a wrap again, if you don't actually have the knowledge of the topic that you wish to have input on a video, just raise it as a question. I'm always really happy to answer questions. I generally try to get back to them as quick as I can. Don't come in as a statement of authority on something that you actually have zero knowledge and understanding on, because unfortunately you just come across as a whackadoodle, and if they're special enough, then I get to have fun doing a whackadoodle teardown like this one. Hope that was a bit of fun as well as information value for you. It was fun for me to try out mucking around with a few new things as well as some practice explaining stuff again. And yeah, I will sadly finish my excuse here for not working on Excel graphs, and better get back to work. And I will look forward to the main vids coming up this Friday. A couple of ideas on which ones they'll likely be, but should have some test update stuff as well. And I will look forward to, as always, seeing your comments and input and chatting with you again soon.